As always, they've saved the best for last. The financial report from the money guy. While we'll get to the highlights later, everyone knows how much I love PowerPoints with lots of graphs and tables. But before we get there, I want to talk about a few other things. As I mentioned during my remarks at the May Executive Board, I come from a small community in central Washington, Thorpe, which is more than just a fruit stand on the side of the freeway. In fact, my entire public school, kindergarten through 12th, comprised of about 150 students and staff. We could literally fit the entire school in the A321 that I currently fly. The graduating class comprised of 7 people, all of whom I would consider family. I mention this because that community and family-like atmosphere installs a sense of solidarity, unity, and more importantly, teamwork. We didn't always see eye to eye on issues, much like an MEC or any leadership group for that matter, but we worked together to make sure all of us were heard and supported each other to be successful. This officer team, staff, and volunteers remind me of this family-like atmosphere. We worked together as a team to come up with solutions to problems for the betterment of the association as a whole. Like you, I learned of Tyler stepping down last week. And to say I was bummed is a complete understatement. This executive team has been working tirelessly around the clock to ensure we introduce change to the better of the association as a whole. And this work wouldn't have been possible without the leadership from Tyler. Sincerely, Tyler, thank you. I'm hopeful that this board will select a suitable replacement that will continue this vision of change together. I had the opportunity to join our Air Canada pilots in their recent successful picket in Toronto. It reminded me yet again how much I love pickets. This togetherness, unity, and solidarity was on full display, and trust me when I tell you, management heard our disappointment in the progress at the table. Now to the business. When JetBlue joined ALPA nearly 10 years ago, I was asked to be the temporary Secretary-Treasurer. Somehow the word temporary magically disappeared. Shortly thereafter, I served in this position for 6 years. I enjoyed my work for our pilots tremendously, but with any job, or even a volunteer one for that matter, there are bound to be frustrations. For me, those frustrations tended to center around things we weren't able to do because of outdated policy or things that I couldn't let our LEC Secretary Treasurers do, like how they could, or more often than not, could not spend their money. I'm sure many of you here have heard some of the same frustrations from your volunteers. When I decided to run for this position last year, I wanted to emphasize change to concentrate on updating ALPA's policies. All of us up here essentially ran on these priorities. Now that I'm in the position, I find myself looking back to my experiences at the JetBlue Secretary-Treasurer, reviewing those things that frustrated me and my colleagues, and seeing what we can change to remove these sources of frustrations for our volunteers. That falls into 2 general areas. First, we are looking at current ALPA policy and seeing where it might be updated. Many of our limits or restrictions, for example, haven't been updated in decades. And second, we are looking at codifying current practices and where we can make them ALPA policy. The main vehicle for this action is the Structure, Systems, and Financial Review Committee, or SAFER, which I held in my position as your treasurer. I want to thank the members of this committee for their leadership and teamwork from ALPA. Bill Bartels from Delta, Don Lopke from FedEx Express, Jeff Hicks from Frontier, Jade Shiwi with Endeavor, Chris Darbell from WestJet, and Mike Hamilton from United. It's been great working with this group of volunteers. Everyone brings a unique perspective, and we work very well together. And of course, I can't leave out the ALPA staff, including our Director of Finance, Beth Robinson. Back in May, I told you how this officer team hit the ground running. With 56 resolutions going through the Executive Council, many of them are proposed by the SAFER Committee. You will be happy to know we have slowed down. There were only 43 at this latest Executive Council meeting. They say Rome wasn't built overnight, but we sure are giving it a go, aren't we, Jason?
That's right.
Many of those resolutions are going to be put before you at this Executive Board, so I hope you came ready. Speaking solely of those my committee submitted, we have a lot of great ways to improve ALPA. You can see the full list here on the screen, but let me share a few of them with you. To begin with, We have recommended a policy change regarding an issue that's been discussed for a few years, whether spillover funds earmarked for retirement, returned to pilots because of government-imposed limits should be usable. Ultimately, pilot groups should be striving to achieve other retirement funding vehicles in their CBAs, but in the meantime, the committee recommends that funds originally earmarked for retirement should be exempt from dues. While this recommendation wasn't unanimous from its SAFER with one dissenter, it was unanimous within the Executive Council. To that end, you have a resolution before you that would provide a 5-year window where any money initially earmarked for retirement but returned to pilots in cash would not be usable. This 5-year period allows our MECs to collectively bargain for additional retirement funding vehicles, so those funds won't need to be returned to pilots going forward. After this 5-year period, an MEC can petition the Executive Council for an extension. Absent this extension, any funds that go back to a pilot rather than into the retirement vehicle will be usable again. We also have a resolution based on my previous experience at JetBlue that will lift some spending restrictions on LEC budgets. While we still need our councils to be fiscally responsible, we have heard your frustrations. This resolution will allow for LECs to spend on things like flight pay loss, ordering more than just finger food for their meetings, group meal allowances, and expanding other areas of allowable spending. Our LECs are currently very limited in what they can spend, which does 2 things. First, it creates that frustration I spoke of before between MEC and LEC Secretary Treasurers, and second, it results in LECs returning most of their allocations to the MECs by the end of the year. It's either that, or we waste our money on some swag that everyone uses once and throws away because the options are so limited. We need to fix that. This follows, of course, previous efforts to bring many of ALPA's other spending policies into the 21st century. Speaking of doing that, you'll also see a resolution to update the amounts provided in the annual ALPA scholarship, which is open to children of medically retired, long-term disabled, or deceased ALPA members. The last time this 4-year scholarship was updated was 1988, when it went from $2,000 to $3,000 a year. That's over 35 years ago. Most of us in this room, we all know how much college costs have increased in 35 years. This resolution would increase that amount to $15,000 per year. The scholarship program also includes a one-time grant introduced in 1995 at $2,000. We recommended increasing that to $10,000. That provides an easy segue into the charts and graph sections today, my favorite part, with a review of our finances from last year and this year and a look at next year. As you see here, the association finished last year with a net deficit of $30.8 million. This was due primarily to the drop in investment value. The same reduction, I'm sure, although probably not the same amount, but the same amount of percent that most of you saw in your personal investments in 2022. Just like we budget conservatively, though, we also invest conservatively. And those numbers, as you will see shortly, are already rebounding. And here's the rebound. Our investment yield is back in the positive. And with that, we are currently at a net surplus of $57.2 million year to date through the end of August. That dues income, again through August 31st, puts us on pace to far surpass our budgeted dues revenue for the year. On these next few slides, we'll look at dues, revenue, and expenses, actual versus budgeted, both on a monthly basis and a cumulative basis. The year 2022 is signified by a dotted line, one for our actual dues or expenses, depending on the chart, and one for our budgeted. Similarly, 2023 year-to-date is shown with a solid line. The chart illustrates both budgeted versus actual, and 2023 versus 2022 in the same chart. First, we see the monthly dues total, actual versus budgeted. Note that our 2023 dues there in the green are both higher than last year and higher than budgeted. That's both very positive signs. We have Delta to thank for their retro, non-retro, one-time payment, to thank for that March bump. I look forward to showing you the October bump next spring once the impact from United's contract is included in the charts. From our monthly dues, we move on to our monthly expenses, both budgeted and actual. As I mentioned in the spring, we've seen an increase in expenses this year as the industry has quickly changed and ALPA services to our pilots has responded. That bump, for example, in the beginning of the year is partially due to our popular leadership training conference. Overall, We're back to seeing regular flight pay loss, in-person meetings, increase in travel, ALPA training, and events throughout the calendar. Now we look at how it all adds up. This slide shows the cumulative total of dues over the course of the year. Our actual dues are significantly outpacing budgeted dues, thanks in part to that March bump from Delta and stronger contracts at a number of the carriers. How significantly? Well, our financial team is going to have to redo this slide next year because we're on pace to outgrow the $250 million top line on that chart. And finally, we see the year-to-date of expenses with our actual spending coming in slightly above our budgeted spending. Again, this is in part due to simply ALPA getting back to business and the cost associated with that. I think it might time to retire this next chart here, but it's worth one final look to see how well ALPA weathered COVID and its aftermath. We're comparing the dues and expenses, both actual and budgeted, over the past 5 years, 1 year pre-COVID through today. You can see how our budgeting was affected by the uncertainty of the pandemic, with ALPA's traditional conservative budgeting standing strong though. And you can also see how our actual dues remain strong as well, thanks, as we all know, to the hard work of pilots and staff in lobbying for the payroll protection plan numerous times. Now to the OCF. The operating contingency fund, the OCF, is healthy and continuing to grow with an increase of almost $10 million thus far in 2023. Having a fund like this available is truly one of the benefits of joining our association. It is imperative that this important resource remains available when needed. Next, we turn to the MCF. As you can see, the MCF dipped a bit last year, but has rebounded well. Last year's drop was partially due to investments, but also partially due to the new usage of the MCF contract implementation grants. Part of that increase now that you see, though, is due to its usage as well, as this program mandates for every dollar that goes out each year in this new grant, $2 will be budgeted to replenish the MCF so that to avoid deplenishing the MCF in our war chest. The MCF contract implementation grant is an automatic grant provided monthly for a full year to assist the implementation process. Too often, our pilot groups were spending all their money on negotiations, and in order to use the MCF money in the final stages of negotiations, it is mandatory for you to spend all your MEC money first. But that can result in tough financial decisions when it's time to implement the contract and deciding how or if to fund the grievances that often come the way with this new contracts. With these grants on MECs, our MECs can make sure the hard-earned contract improvements get implemented in a timely fashion for your members. And as union leaders, you can implement a new contract without sacrificing other priorities, such as training new representatives and volunteers. And even if the funds are unused at the end of those 12 months, they're yours to keep. Here, you see the 2024 budget approved by the Executive Council. We'll be taking a closer look at the budget in Delegate Committee 1, but here are the basics. The total budgeted dues income is $299.8 million, which is almost 30% increase over last year's budget and a sign of just how well our industry is doing. And of course, it reflects the addition of our new A carrier, Air Canada, plus all the contract improvements throughout this year and last. We didn't even see our first $200 million budget dues figure until 2019. And here we are, already knocking on the doorstep of $300 million in budgeted dues revenue. And I promise you we'll go over that with the new United contract, because that wasn't taken into consideration when doing the budgeting. The pie chart you see here is broken up according to the percentages in our bylaws, with the amounts right to the right taken off the top before remaining total is divided amongst the MECs, the administrative support account, OCF, and the LECs. I thanked Beth Robinson and her staff earlier regarding the work with the SAFER Committee, but it's worth mentioning them again here regarding the budget. As a first-year Vice President of Finance Treasurer, this was my first time working with them on the overall budget. They are a well-oiled machine, to say the least, and they made it a lot easier for this first-timer. As a team, we were able to put together a budget that passed the Executive Council without contention. The budget also includes a few allocations from our strategic reserve that I wanted to share with you. $8.4 million will be returned to our MECs. $8.4 million will be dispersed into the new building fund. As a side note, The constituted headquarters building committee has met in July as well as this week. And lastly, $15.3 million dispersed to the MCF. You see here the short history thus far of our new building fund, with the annual contributions noted. Our current balance in this fund is $5.1 million, with another $1.2 million due by the end of 2023. I'll do a little public math, which is scary, but I'll do it. Public math, 6.3 plus 8.3 million will put us just shy of $15 million in this important fund. This is in place so as we approach the end of our lease here at Vallow Park, it will help us move if that's what's in the best interest of the association. We're simply being prepared to have all options available. It's certainly an exciting time to be in ALPA, and I'm excited to be in the position to change things for the better. The SAFER Committee is going to continue its work, and I've told them, along with Jason, that pretty much anything and everything is on the table. Looking forward with the likelihood of more than $300 million in dues revenue, we're talking about things like potentially another dues reduction or investigating a variable dues rate, adjusting the spending limit allocation formula, and also reviewing pilot income that should or maybe should not be exempt from dues, or an all-above approach. Might be everything. Progress is happening, and we want to keep moving forward. I talked earlier about how I'm using my experience as a Secretary-Treasurer at JetBlue to fuel some of these changes. If you find yourself, or your officers, or your committee members, or any volunteers find themselves finding frustrations that you feel can be alleviated, please let us know. Reach out to me and make the suggestion, and we'll see what we can do. The Air Safety Forum last month had the tagline of moving forward together, but that's really applicable to ALPA overall. Thank you to all of you for your volunteering and for helping us move forward together. I can't wait to see where we go next. Thank you.